All right, let me start with an example of how Euratom informs European energy policies. As we all know, Euratom is not much in the media, right? So I chose an example which was in the media quite recently, and that's the green investment label, the European taxonomy. In July this year, the European Parliament was about to decide whether nuclear energy and gas should be included in the taxonomy. We asked the European Parliament to vote it down and to say yes to democracy and say yes to a science-based taxonomy. So let us take a look at what happened outside the European Parliament's building before and after the vote. All right, can you go to the website?
Gas is a fossil fuel, and you will not change it by calling it green and sustainable. It's a dirty fossil fuel, it's a bloody fossil fuel, and it kills our present, not even our future. And so if you are serious about solidarity with Ukraine, if you're serious about the climate crisis, then vote it down. When do we want it? Now! So vote it down! Vote it down! Vote it down! I think the Parliament has not objected to the Commission delegated regulation of 9th of March 2022. Remove please. We do not want to hear any more words from you, any promises, any words of solidarity, any words of concern. It's empty. We don't believe you anymore. Because if you were trustworthy, you wouldn't put out a taxonomy. That's a fossil fuel taxonomy. So do not give us more words.
Well, that's powerful, isn't it? It still gives me goosebumps because I've been there on the street with my little daughter back then. So the taxonomy case is very complex, and I will try to break it down to the most relevant elements. The taxonomy regulation came into force in July 2020. It's a classification system that combines, on the one hand, economic activities and on the other hand, environmental concerns. So economic activities which and which fulfill the do not leave behind criteria will be labeled as green. This is supposed to channel divestment in sustainable channels. The inclusion of nuclear energy and gas was a highly controversial and sensitive issue for months. All right, let us take a look at who sat at the economy table. And sorry now. Sorry. So, who sat at the taxonomy table? The European Commission. To supplement the existing regulation of 2020, the European Commission was authorized to adopt a delegated act. A delegated act revises non-essential parts of European legislation only. There are profound indications that the European Commission exceeded its power by including nuclear energy and gas in its draft. It was a political and not a technical decision. And by the way, beforehand, the European Commission consulted two independent bodies which relate to and are financed by Euratom. The European Parliament, as a co-legislator, was demoted to merely saying yes or no to a precedent-setting part of European legislation. Amending the Commission's draft was not possible. The responsible committees, Environment and Economy, came out strongly, saying no to the greenwashing of nuclear energy and gas. The plenary vote, however, labeled them as green and sustainable. So nuclear energy will be favored on the financial markets in the future. What about civil society? Well, we were on the streets, but sorry, we didn't have a say at all. Despite the better regulation guidelines, civil society participation was completely bypassed in the whole process. Who else sat at the table? Definitely French President Macron. He lined up with 6 other member states to urge the European Commission to uphold the European treaties. More precisely, he meant abiding by the Euratom Treaty. So let us see what he said. The development of nuclear power is one of the primary objectives of the treaty establishing the Euratom community. That's the Euratom Treaty. And now be attentive. The Euratom Treaty obliges EU institutions to promote nuclear power. Furthermore, referring to the Hinckley case, which I will talk about later on, he said, nuclear energy is an objective of common interest within the European Union. Well, thanks, Macron. I couldn't have summed up better what Euratom is all about. My first take-home message today, there will be 3 of them, that the European Commission represents the European Atomic Energy Community. The Commission does not represent a renewable energy organization. It is these 27 folks who have a clear mandate. For instance, they negotiate and sign international agreements on behalf of Euratom. Given that, I sometimes wonder how independent can the European Commission be at all? As we've seen in the taxonomy case, not very. All right, so let's go to Rome in 1957. We had the 2 Roman treaties establishing the European Economic Community on the one hand and the European Atomic Energy Community on the other hand. Later, we had the signing of the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. We had Amsterdam in 1997, Nice 2001, Lisbon 2007. As we are here today in Copenhagen in 2022, there are 2 main treaties defining the workings of the European Union. That's the Treaty on European Union, TEU, and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, TFEU. What has happened to Euratom since then? Well, nothing. I hope you can read it up there. So since 1957, Euratom has remained unchanged. We have other European communities, for instance, the one for coal and steel, which have expired in the meantime. Oh, that takes us right back to the euphoria in the 1950s and 1960s about nuclear energy as a panacea to all energy methods. It's a totally different context in terms of public acceptance of nuclear energy, available technologies, and energy policies. Euratom has survived nuclear disasters like Churchill and 3 Mile Island in 1979, Chernobyl in 86, Forsmark 2006, Fukushima 2011, and all the other regular serious incidents. Well, sometimes I think suppression works in order not to freak out, right? So Euratom has survived each and every single advancement in the energy sector, unchanged. That's a scandal. I personally like to think of Euratom as a dinosaur. My daughter really loves dinosaurs. The dino is very persistent. He turns 65 this year. Sometimes he's a bit tired and asleep, but whenever the pro-nukes groups need him, he will firmly stand his ground. All right, let us look at this chart again. So we have the European Union on the one side and Euratom on the other side. It's two separate legal entities, and yet they are intertwined because they share the same institutions and budget. So the image I have in mind is one of two parallel systems moving into a different direction at a different pace. So here on the left side, we have something that has evolved over time. Think of the development of environmental law, for instance. And on the other hand, we have something that just got stuck back in 1957. And the logic of the two systems is very different. When it comes to radiation protection, for instance, the European Union would aim to protect the health of its population and the environment, while Euratom intends to promote an industry. And well, you wouldn't like to regulate an industry too much that you basically intend to promote, right? So what we can say is that all the Euratom regulations do not live up to the best-in-class standards. So Euratom contradicts many norms of the European Union. There's a huge conflict. What I'm also trying to emphasize here is that the TEU and the TFEU are at the top of the hierarchy of union law. So is Euratom. They are known as primary legislation. What does that mean? Well, a pause makes it more exciting, right? It's hard to believe, but it's true. Sorry, that's not the one. As primary law, the Euratom Treaty has the same legal value as the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. That's powerful. We are not talking about access to clean water here. We are talking about a high-risk industry which has serious health and environmental impacts. Well, since my organization is based in Salzburg, one of its most famous landmarks, the Salzburg Fortress, shouldn't be missing from my presentation. Sometimes I wonder if the dino lives up there. The dino has established a special space and a protected and exclusive zone for itself and the atomic industry within the fortress. So the liberalization of markets is somehow an object of worship in the European Union, right? So accordingly, what we have is an internal energy market. I marked it in gray here. What stands out and is excluded from this market is the Euratom Fortress. It secures privileges for one single industry, and it fends off nasty things like a free competition of the market, right? How does that work? Let me give you an example. Hinkley Point C is a nuclear new build in the UK. In 2013, the construction company, French state-owned EDF, struck a deal with the UK government. Among other concessions, the UK government guaranteed EDF a price of £92.5 for each megawatt hour generated by Hinkley over its first 35 years of operation. A study by the German energy brain pool shows that the subsidy would amount to 108 billion euros over 35 years. The European Commission, there we go again, approved the British state aid in 2014 and justified its decision on the Euratom Treaty. What followed is a lawsuit over 6 years with the Austrian government lodging an appeal against the distortion of market and the European Court of Justice finally dismissing the appeal in 2020. So what can we learn from that case? Well, you can't see it entirely here. So Euratom defines its own powerful legal system for the use of nuclear energy, and it secures the very funding of a high-risk industry. We sometimes wonder whether the Euratom dino will be resurrected in the case of the planned nuclear new build in Sweden. Tremendous subsidies to construct and run a nuclear power plant based on Euratom, again. Well, let us move to the next slide. Well, so we have financial favors like state aid measures, and we have the greenwashing of nuclear energy in the taxonomy. But money for the nuclear industry flows in other channels as well. So this is just a quick overview to complete the picture. The first 2 points mainly cover nuclear research and a bit of training. Then we have a special loans project and the instrument for nuclear safety cooperation as a direct support of Euratom's foreign policy. Yes, the community has its own foreign policy. It's obvious that all the money listed here could be invested in other forms of energy production. This is a clear political choice. €1 spent is €1 spent, right? We also have concrete institutions which derive their legitimacy from the Euratom Treaty and which employ thousands of people. Please check out my analysis for further details. Generally, I'm not a big fan of such figures because to some of us, the money spent is little, and to some of us, it's a lot. What really matters is that all of us understand that Euratom is a system that penetrates European energy policies. Well, that takes me to the next slide and my last argument. So literally, what I want to show you is that the Dino has created a political, legal, and economic zone around himself. The fortress contains the zone, and it serves as a semi-permeable membrane. So it allows the Dino to freely go for a ride outside and influence all the things that are happening outside. What it doesn't allow any elements to come in. For instance, democracy. Euratom is not subject to any democratic control. When it comes to Euratom, the European Commission acts beyond any checks and balances. The role of the European Parliament is downgraded to a mere consultative function. It cannot supervise the European Commission, and for instance, it cannot decide on Euratom's international agreements. Euratom clearly stands apart from the improvements in transparency and democratization which have been achieved through the reforms of the European treaties. It's a very undemocratic zone within the European Union. For instance, I will give you another example.
The last slide.
Yes. The European Citizens' Initiative is an instrument of direct democracy and was introduced by the Lisbon Treaty. With that mechanism, European citizens can ask the European Commission directly to take action on a particular subject. One of the first initiatives registered was My Voice Against Nuclear Power. It was rejected by the European Commission based on Euratom. Yeah, there we go again. So, my last slide, my last take-home message. Please bear the Dino and the fortress in mind whenever you hear of Euratom. Sometimes I wonder, how would an energy transition look without the Dino? What would a truly free energy market look like? I'm really keen to work with you on getting rid of the Dino. And one day, I hope to finally tell my daughter that dinosaurs do not exist any longer. Thank you.